Hi. In this session, we will look at pivot tables, grids, and their formatting, where we can do more advanced formatting of the data that's actually in those pivots and grids. And let's have a look. We are in the dashboard editor, and we have our sales data. And let's put in a pivot and a grid. So pivots first. Pivots can do columns and rows. And inside those, you can put values. So a very simple sample could be, let's have our country as columns. We have US and Canada. And as rows, we want customer groups. We can go in and put multiple, so there will actually be drop downs. And we can go in and see what's in the different systems. For values, we can put in, for example, total. We can, of course, also do multiple columns if needed. But we can do totals, and let me get some formatting in here. Always nice to get the right formatting. And see immediately, just like you see in Excel pivot tables, what the data is. And if we drill down, we see, of course, data for that as well. Let's have a look at the options for this, the pivot table. We can go in and set in this state, so should everything be expanded or it's been being expanded on column level and row level, depending on what we want in here. We can go in and say totals. Should there be totals on the sum ones here or not? So depending on if you want to see it like this or if you want to have the total in there as well. Depends on your preferences, of course. And the same for rows and columns. Finally, we can set up the grand totals. Should there be any grand total for columns and grand totals for rows? So that's basically what we can do with the pivot tables. We'll get into formatting once we have the grid up and running. So let me move the pivot table over here and let's have a look at the grid. The grid is one of the things I find most exciting. It's not as fancy looking as some of the other things, but it can do a lot of things other than just show the list of data. So let's go in and have all the business partners and put in the number of invoices they have. We need to count that instead of sum it. And how many doc totals we have. So we easily get a nice view of the data. Let me put this into numbers so we can see some easier data. And if we look at the data, we have the different options, nothing special. We can go and design this a bit. Do we want horizontal lines or not? Do we want vertical lines or not? Do we want banded colors or not? Do we want to merge cells? If we, for example, go in and say item group here, you can see construction data multiple times because there are multiple business partners. And if we merge, they will actually merge into those as well. Word wrap, if we have long data or not. And how we want to auto-fit things, or do we want to actually, what we chose here is the one that stays there, or should it follow the data? Let's get rid of the customer group. It's not really important here. So out of the box, we can just drag and drop these in, and we get the data. But for each of these, we can actually go in and do some different options. For card name, doesn't really make sense to make it into a measure. It will just be a count of how many there are. So for that, it's a dimension. Dimension meaning the value itself, not aggregating in any way. So for text, we 99% of the time just have dimension. For this, right now, it's a normal sum. So it's a measure and we want to see it as the value. So there's 45 invoices to Ada Technologies. If we want to, we can show it as a bar instead, and it will show it into a bar, and we can hover the mouse over and see it's still 45. So that means we can actually take the dognum in twice in this, makes sense, and have it as both a count and a dognum. Later on I will show you how to actually move those into one column. But it is possible to do. Then we can also make what's called a delta. Delta meaning that it's comparing two values. So instead of only having one field that comprise of that column, you can have multiple fields. You can go in and say how it should work with percentages or actual values. If the value is higher, if that's a good thing, should it be in green or should it be in red? Should it just have an indicator if it's better or worse? And some threshold types with percentages and so on. I don't really have any data here because you can now see that this requires, let's go back. This will now requires a target and an actual. Just for the fun of it, let me drop this in so we can actually see there's a plus and a minus in the system. And if I put it in here, you can see we get minuses because I cannot really compare doc total with doc num count. But you get the point, and if we look at the out of the box values, we actually do this a lot in here because we have a previous value and a target value or budget value and a actual value. So that's the way you can use the dimensions like that and get a plus and a minus. For this simple data, I don't really have anything with before and after, previous or budget in any way. So I'm just showing you for the sake of it with two different numbers that doesn't really have any relation to each other. The final one we can do is Sparkline. Sparkline is kind of cool, but also a bit tricky to see. It's a mini graph within a graph. So if we do it, you can see I have a doc total, and it just shows a dot. And that's because we haven't given the argument of the Sparkline. The argument of the Sparkline should be something date specific. So if I put in date here and turn it into month year, it will actually do a mini graph of me seeing here that Ada Technologies bought a lot in the start, and then they have died out a bit, while Maxitech have had a resurgence in the they didn't really buy anything from us in the past, but now they actually buy a lot of from us here. So mini charts, kind of, yeah. Do you like them or not? That's a matter of opinion. There's some minimum and maximum values you can put in. You can also take them away so they're not in there. And start and here endpoints, you can also take this away. I tend to like it more like this, so it's easier to see it as a small chart. You can put it in as bars as well. Just some bars tend to be a bit too difficult to look at, or as a yes/no value. I like it like this normally, if I put them in. So we see the total like that as well. We cannot really do that with pivot tables because we just need some values in there. But what we can do with both of these is we can go in and do various conditions on the different columns. So first of all, we can go in and add totals. So I can, for example, go in and add a sum of all of these together. I can add multiple totals in terms of what is the average, and what is the minimum, maximum, how many are there, so there's 11. The average is this, the sum is this, and it takes up more and more room for that. And I can do it on multiple of these. So let's take the average of the dog count. So on average, our customers have for 38.5 invoices. Doesn't make sense to do here. I can count it, but it doesn't make sense to do average or anything on such specific data. So let's get rid of that. So totals are very simple to do. Just add them in and they're up and running. What we can also do is we can do formatting rules. And we can do a lot of different things in here. We can do values. So for example, if the value is greater than something, then do some specific on it. So if the total value is higher than, let's say, 100,000, this is 10,000, 100,000. I actually think they are all over 100,000, so let's say 500,000. Then let's make it red. So these are over 500,000, so that they are red now. So I can actually either give them some value, some color as the behind the scenes, or I can go in and, for example, make them bold. I can make them red, or I can go in and make a custom appearance. So let me double click on this and I can go and say what should be the background color. Well, it should be this color and the text color should be this, and I want to have it italic, all of these, and I want it in, let's have Comic Sans. If I can find it. Yeah. So if it's that specific one, it looks like this. So you can actually go in and make your very own special setup on how that specific field should look. So it's a bit ugly, the one I chose, so let me put something in like this, for example. I can also do icons instead of coloring, so I can say if they are high, that's a good thing, or in terms of depending on the data, well, it's a bad thing, they should be flagged in that sense. It of course tells what it applies to, so I can also go in and do it like this, and I also already have it there, so I can actually apply it to this over here, that the flag will be higher, be placed on another column if that value is there. So it is possible. Most of the time you do it on the same, but you can also do it on the entire row. So every one of these that makes sense. These are special, so they can. Let me just for the sake of it take this and turn it into value so you can actually see it affects all of them. Doesn't really make that much sense for perhaps the flags and icons, but appearances it makes more sense that you can say they're all red, the ones that actually have the high value, or they are all green because they're good. So with that, that's just a simple one where I said was greater than. I can also go in and do more advanced things like top button. So the top 5 should be colored, or the bottom 5, or whatever I want to. Average, so it's above average, then let's make it this color. If it's below average, so it takes the average, find out if it's higher or lower. So we can see average is 426, so we can see the ones higher than 426 are now colored. Let's get rid of these rules so we can go on. You can also go in and do expressions, so you can actually go in and do if it's this and this but not this, then make this color. So there's a complete formula system in here as well. Then we can go in and do ranges. So you can do ranges in icons, colors, and gradients. They work the same. So I will only show for one of them, and that will be gradients here. So you can go in and say 2 gradient levels or 3 gradient levels on how much you want. So for example, let me take it green here. So among all the values, if they are in the top 10%, they should be this color. If they are the top lower percent, be this color, and so on between different rows. You can say well, how big the range should be, and how many different colors, raw colors here. So you actually only affect these 3, and between those, it will also generate the color. So I can do it like this, and it will also generate. And it will now color those in the different options. And again, we can apply to rows and everything, so we can smear it up with all kinds of colors. You can go in and change these and make them yourself if you really want to. I did that if you want as a sample for the financial dashboard and the aging. I did my custom ranges. You can do it with percentage, or you can do it with actual values. Let's get rid of this. And go in and look at the last ones. So those are bars with different ranges. So bars are very simple in terms that they can just do a bar. And I like to do that compared to when we go into the count here and we saw that it could be a bar. But given it's a bar, it cannot show the value at the same time. So I tend to never use this option with bar value here, but instead go in and do the coloring like this, so I can have both the value in the field and the bar in there. The bars can be color ranged, so they can have different colors if needed. And again, they can also have gradients. So for example, like this. Depends on what you find is the most appropriate for the system. Lots of these can also be done in the pivots. So for example, country, let's add a value expression. If the country is equal to US, then make them green. And it will do that for that specific value. If we want to go it by the sum fields inside the values actually, we can go in and say, I want to have, let's take color ranges, 5 color ranges, and it will color the different ones. So depending on what you want in those, you can do pretty much the same. So with that, you can see that grids are actually much more than just some stupid list. They can color, so you can highlight, you can make bars, you can make the sparklines, you can sum everything, and so lots of cool ways of actually presenting your data. So with that, thank you for attending, and I hope it was beneficial.